Chapter 8. Destruction of Property. During the month of March 1979, Amirani again went into court to attempt to stop the unnecessary demolition of my house and property. The excavating search went far beyond the scope of any search warrant in the history of the country. Never did they describe the things they'd hoped to find by removing all the interior walls, floors, and ceilings. They could have easily removed the floors in each room without taking out the walls and ceilings, but their purpose was to make the house irreparable and unsaleable, to prevent me from salvaging anything financially from the property, to preclude my chances of a fair trial by destroying my final opportunity to raise money through total liquidation of my last asset. The third, fourth, and fifth search warrants stated only that they were looking for human bodies and / remains thereof. Were they looking for a body in walls 4.5 inches thick? Why remove all exterior barn wood siding? Maybe someone in the sheriff's department needed paneling for his family room. They had removed all of my personal property from the house, office, and garage, carting it away in two 40-foot moving vans under the supervision of the sheriff's and state attorney's office. The pretext for the seizure writ was that they were looking for evidence that may have proven the identity of the bodies. When they had done all the damage they could do, the state's attorney filed a civil suit in circuit court for permission to tear down the remaining shell of the house, contending that it was unoccupied, unsafe, dangerous, and a health hazard. Robert Mata filed for an appearance in the housing court of Judge Richard E. Jorzak, informing him that I wanted to be present at the hearing to show cause. That court was in the Daily Center building, and it was my right to be there. But authorities believed they could not guarantee my safety. Judge Jorzak recessed the hearing until it could be transferred to the criminal courts building, and he used Judge Garippo's courtroom at night. Mata filed a cross-complaint, claiming that the damage was done by the state, and that the state should be made to pay for it if it was deemed that the house had to be razed. He brought out that I did not own the house alone, as the state claimed, so the suit was filed against John Wayne Gacy as half-owner, and against my mother and two sisters as co-owners of the other half. In opening statements, the state contended that the house was a public nuisance, that the floor joists had been cut away, that the plumbing, sewage, and drainage systems were gone. The electrical wiring was exposed. The crawl space was dug out 4 to 6 feet in depth, destroying the integrity of the foundation footings, and that the entire area had flooded, posing the danger of fire and risk of electrocution. Mata pointed out that the property was jointly owned, that none of the other 3 owners were charged with anything, and that their rights should be protected. That because the state, with the use of illegal search warrants, had gone far beyond what the law allows in conducting a house search, it had seriously violated the rights of the other 3 owners. And since it was repairable at that time, the state should be able to restore the house to its pre-search condition. It was structurally sound and worth saving. The state put on 3 witnesses. The first was a real estate appraiser who testified that the house had become a magnet for sightseers, that it no longer had any value, and that it was no more than a curiosity which was lowering property values in the neighborhood. He had made an inspection and found that it would be cost prohibitive to restore the house. Mata attacked the claims. Isn't it a fact that if the house were repaired and all the police were removed, it would not be a magnet for sightseers, and the area would return to normal? Yes, I suppose so. That if it was restored to the way it was before they demolished it, its value would return to what it was originally and maybe higher. Yes, that is possible. But on the other hand, with what was found on that property, it may never have any value. Finally, Mata asked, "And isn't it also a fact that if you deduct the amount that the state is willing to spend to level the property, the cost of rebuilding and restoring it would not be much higher?" The witness was silent. Mata asked the court to direct him to answer. He waited, looking at the state's attorney, then said, "Well, if you're looking at it that way, no, it would not cost that much more. But you're talking about rebuilding the entire inside of the home, which would take considerable time." The state's second witness was from the county health department. He said that the house was a health hazard, not only for the fire and electrocution risk, but also the sewage pipes were broken, allowing sewage to back up into the house, posing a health problem. Mata didn't argue that point. The conditions which then existed did make it a health and safety hazard. But, of course, restoring the house would solve that problem. Their third witness was the chief inspector from the Office of Code Violations of the County Building Department. He testified that, upon inspection of the premises, he found not only a large number of building violations stemming from improper drainage, but that the condition of the electrical wiring was extremely hazardous and would have to be condemned. He claimed that the foundation would be in a state of collapse when the ground thawed in the spring, that the building was nothing more than a shell, dangerously unstable, and the remaining superstructure would tumble with the first strong wind. To counter that claim, Mata asked, "Well, what do you call a strong wind for this time of year?" "In an open area, such as where the house is setting, I believe a 45 to 55 mile an hour wind would bring down the house." Mata played with him, asking about a 40 mile an hour wind, a 30 mile an hour wind, then he jumped the figure to 75. And always the witness claimed the house would collapse, or at least parts of it would topple. Mata asked if it was repairable. "No way. The house is too far gone to repair." Mata had no more questions, and the state rested its case. Amirani laid the groundwork to undermine the state's witnesses. Our first witness was a geologist who, after listing his impressive credits, showed charts explaining the ground compaction, contents of the entire area, and in particular the test results of the samples taken from the site, extracted from some 30 feet down. It was his opinion that it would take an earthquake to move that foundation. The state was left agape. No questions. The second witness called by Amirani was a graduate structural engineer, a professor at Illinois Institute of Technology. He testified that he had made an inspection of the house and the site, that all the structural outer walls were sound, and that all of the roof joists were intact. In his opinion, while there was extensive damage to the interior, the building was structurally sound enough for a contractor to rebuild the interior. Emirani asked about the wind factor. If we had a 50 to 75 mile per hour wind, what then could happen to the structure? The witness didn't hesitate. Well, that high of a wind, you might lose some shingles. And from the sides, anything that might be broken loose from the damage to the building. Even with the windows out, couldn't the wind just pick up the whole building and blow it over? The witness shook his head. No. And in fact, with the windows out, the wind would go right through the structure. Air will seek the least resistance. And the wind you're talking about is almost tornado level in these parts, this time of year. The state, again, had no questions, and the defense rested. It was 9:30, and the court recessed for the night. That same night, O'Hare National Airport clocked 96-mile-per-hour winds, less than 3 miles away from my former home. After a morning inspection of the house, it was shown that, while the few shingles were peeling and loose debris from the house had blown around, no part of the building had split or toppled. In the courtroom that night, Morris Alexander, one of the state's attorneys, flippantly accused Emirani of trickery. I've heard everything before, but, raising his eyes to the ceiling, I never thought you would go get his help. That night, the state put on a rebuttal witness, a neighbor who had lived just east of my house, Mr. Brown, not his real name, with Alexander leading him, testified that the house was an eyesore in the neighborhood, and that sightseers had damaged his property. It could be a danger to children in the area because of the condition of the building, and that the putrid odor was so strong that they had to keep their windows and doors closed. There was nothing we could attack in that statement. It was all true. So Sam took a new avenue. He asked Mr. Brown how long he lived in the area and how long he had known me. And then he asked how the area, and in particular my house, had looked during the summer of 1978. Oh, it was beautiful. Gacy's place was always well kept. He would work on it like most of the neighbors, but I would say his place was kind of like the showplace of the neighborhood. He had it decked out with flowers in a horseshoe shape around his driveway, and people would stop to admire it. So you would say, before December 22nd, 1978, Mr. Gacy's place was a showplace, and that after that time it went downhill? That's correct. All that mess came after that date. After closing arguments, Judge Richard Jorzak issued an order that the house would come down. I am approving the order for demolition of the property, but I am also going to approve the defense's counter-complaint for damages. The award was for the full amount of the suit, $325,000. $100,000 for actual damage and $225,000 for punitive damages. But he added that retribution and compensation would be held back pending all criminal matters, since there was a court order which forbade any judgments of a nature secondary to the trial per se to be consummated prior to finalization of the trial proper. On April 11th, 1979, the house was torn down. A fiasco. A travesty. Personal property. under an order signed by Judge Louis Garippo on January 25, 1975. The State Attorney's Office, its agents, or any associated law enforcement agency was to take into their possession all personal property of John Wayne Gacy, to be used as evidence and to be preserved in their possession, not to be damaged, destroyed, or disposed of in any manner. It was the duty of the State Attorney's Office to inventory each article confiscated from the property under the directive of the search warrant. The complaint for search warrant, written December 29, 1978, by Greg Bedeau and signed by Judge Marvin Peters, said, to seize the following instruments, articles, and things relating to PDM Corporation: all books, records, files, correspondence, papers, documents, diagrams, plots, blueprints, address books, recording tapes, photographs, photographic negatives, cameras, and all other materials relating to PDM Corporation, an Illinois corporation located at 8213 Summerdale, and owned and operated by John Gacy. Additionally, all personal papers, photographs, photographic negatives, tax records, receipts, books, address books, travel records, including but not limited to travel tickets, jewelry, belts, belt buckles, watches, rings, and all clothing, and any and all possessions of John Gacy individually located at the above location. All possessions removed were to be inventoried according to the letter of the judge of the Garippo order. All those possessions were to be protected and preserved. My inventory of that property amounted to over $86,000. Since it was December, my end-of-year inventories for tax purposes have been completed, but the state didn't expect me to have copies with my accountant. Where's the inventory? Where is $86,708 worth of business office equipment and construction material, 9 rooms of furniture, and all personal possessions of John Wayne Gacy? Medley Movers took them to its 95th Street warehouse and later moved them to the county warehouse at 2500 South Rockford Street. Garippo said to preserve and protect. But when my sister, along with my attorneys, went to claim my possessions, only 10% was worth saving. 30% was damaged beyond repair. 60% was simply missing, unaccounted for to this day, after 5 years of inquiry. Not one person has been held accountable. Not one person has been indicted for theft. I know now that this is the kind of corruption any citizen can expect from the Cook County justice system. All the members of the sheriff's office and the state attorney's office who were assigned to the case should be indicted on felony charges or made to account for all that is missing. It was not petty theft. It was felony theft. Nearly 5 years after the conviction, the personal property had not been found or returned to my family. Why would the state hold $15,000 worth of artwork? Certainly not as evidence in a murder trial. PDM was never charged with a crime, yet nearly $38,000 worth of supplies and construction equipment belonging to PDM was carted away and was certainly not in evidence during the trial. Judge Louis Garippo, along with the rest involved in this case, after the trial, quickly slipped out of public office. I don't know. Maybe to hide their guilt? Maybe for their participation in that most shameless farce of justice. The new possessors of my property were not limited to law enforcement. Amirani signed personal vouchers for property of mine, which he received from the sheriff's office. Items he took to his office included a color TV, and stereo equipment. He told me those items were later stolen from his office. He would like to replace them, but he didn't carry theft insurance.